I'm here with Roberto Hung, and I'm Oscar Schlenker, and we're about to begin the first podcast of Venezuela in Focus. What do you think about that?
Great. I'm just looking at your camera. It's nice. So a lot of people is going to enjoy and to know what's really going on in Venezuela.
Yeah, it's some serious stuff. So we're about to get started. So let's get started. Comencemos.
Sí.
Welcome to Venezuela in Focus. I'm Oscar Schlenker.
I'm Roberto Hung.
And this is a new podcast. This is our first podcast of Venezuela in Focus. Why did we decide to do this?
Well, we were talking, when was it? Last week?
Yeah.
That strangely, we go to the news and we try to see what's going on in Venezuela, being us from Venezuela, but we see that there is not much information in English. We can see the web, we can see the channels, and not at all in English. So a lot of people from the United States call me, from Europe call me, and this is the idea. So we live here, and that's about it.
Especially now where there is so much news about Venezuela. We're getting new news every hour. We're starting this podcast after a very intense weekend where we had a Venezuelan Live Aid concert. Then we had all the humanitarian aid trying to get in the country. They did not succeed. We have now the interim president outside of the country trying to get support, more international support. What else do we have? We have the Lima group today. We have a lot to talk about.
Well, each one of those, we can have an entire program about it.
Yes.
But let's do something. Let's try to talk a little bit what happened from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and ending up with the Lima group and the pronunciation of if there is possible military intervention or not, and what the states are thinking about.
Yes, because the idea of a military intervention has been circling around for some time now, but we never really thought of it as a possibility until after Saturday, because we saw some terrible acts against human rights being displayed by the Venezuelan military, by the Nicolas Maduro's government, and we have to discuss it.
Well, let's begin with the Friday concert. I mean, it was great. It was a huge show. The entire world was seeing, all the help that we're receiving for the community, the music community. And all of a sudden, it wasn't broadcast by any TV in Venezuela. We were only capable of seeing it through internet, probably Nat Geo and one Spanish channel, Antena 3. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they were out of the program, so we couldn't see it.
Yeah, there was. So here in Venezuela, we have cable operators and we have some satellite operators like DirecTV. And in DirecTV, Nat Geo and Antena 3, which is a Spanish channel, they were showing the Venezuelan Live Aid concert. And suddenly, they went off the air. And it's still, to this day, we haven't seen it. Now, this is something that has happened before in Venezuela. We've seen a lot of channels being kicked off the air because they transmitted something that wasn't agreeable to Nicolas Maduro's government.
Yes, but if you see the prior cases, they were probably political situation. But this was at a concert. Okay, it has some humanitarian background, but it was a concert. So imagine you have this Spanish channel and also this American, Nat Geo, and they cut it off. Yeah. So we'll see the idea of freedom of expression and freedom of press with this government.
As long as they don't cut our podcast or censor anybody that shows our podcast, then I think we'll be all right.
Well, but this podcast is the legitimate exercise of the freedom of expression. Yeah. That's why we're going to publish it wide open in the network. Well,
it's a problem because also YouTube has been censored in Venezuela during certain times when Juan Guaidó was giving a speech or when there was something that wasn't really agreeable and everybody was tuning in. There's been some reports of even Twitter and YouTube being cut off at specific times. So it's interesting to see how that plays out legally.
Well, not legally. I wouldn't mention legally.
Mm-hmm.
It has this veil of being legal, but it's not legal at all. Well, we'll see how we do it. And if we get censored, I think we can consider we're doing it well.
Yeah. And, well, speaking about the concert again, we had two concerts. I mean, we have two presidents, we have two national assemblies, we have two Supreme Courts, and we had two concerts. Did you see the other concert?
I don't know. I don't know if we can talk about two presidents, two assemblies, or two tribunals like the Tribunal Supremo de Justicia. There is only one president, there is only one assembly, and there is one tribunal only. The thing is, which one of the pretend to be is the one, the legitimate ones. And, well, it's supposed to be two concerts. The second one, we couldn't see it either, or they tried to promote it, but I couldn't see it at all.
It was very difficult to see the Hands Off Venezuela concert, and it didn't bring as many people as they were promoting it.
Or none.
But it did bring some. But we know how that works out here.
Wow.
So.
And then we came into the Saturday. Saturday morning was the date that was fixed for receiving humanitarian aid. What happened Sunday?
Well, they managed to get some aid in, especially from the Brazilian border. But soon after, a lot of the aid that was coming in from the Colombian border, the military stopped it. Some supporters of Nicolás Maduro, which we can call colectivos or we can call paramilitary. There's many names to them. They're armed civilian groups attacked the concentration that was trying to escort the humanitarian inside, and they burned two trucks, and one went back.
Yes, but before those facts, there were some others that we have to consider. Before the movement of those trucks, some military personnel, Guardias Nacionales, they rushed into the Colombian border, and saying that they were escaping from Venezuela.
Yeah, that's an issue of words now, because there's been at least 160 deflected military personnel that has gone into the borders. Now, and yesterday and today, we're seeing some that are fleeing into Brazil and deflecting from the whole military. Now, the opposition doesn't want us to call them deflecting because they're still part of the armed forces of Venezuela. They've just changed their alliance from Maduro to Juan Guaidó. But they even say we're deflecting. So what should we call it?
Well, technically, if you consider that they were acting, restraining, they were like kidnapped. You were kind of kidnapped and you escaped from your captors. So, of course, it's more than words than that. I mean, it's the idea, because it will be easier to call them deflected, but at the same time, so you renounce to any legitimate act you were doing. So it is interesting, but it's more than the numbers and more than the name. It's the quality of it. So it doesn't mean that there's everything fine in the military, and the presence of civil armed groups and not the regular forces. It has a lot of. I have to say a lot of it.
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet that said the Venezuelan armed forces is cracked but not broken. So we could say that. You could see the fractures. You could see what's going on.
Wow.
But speaking about the terminology of things, I want to get to something, and not to divert too much of our conversation, but the self-proclaimed president issue. All media is calling Juan Guaidó self-proclaimed president. You, as an attorney, as an expert on the Constitution of Venezuela, what's the take? Is he a self-proclaimed?
It's not a self-proclaimed. Mm-hmm. He is the president of the National Assembly, and reading the constitutional system, not existing a valid presidency, a person to exercise the presidency, the people called by the Constitution to amend that empty of power is the president of the assembly. So it's not auto-proclaimed. The proclamation is in the Constitution. So it will be him or another person. So what he did was accepting that part of the Constitution. So he's assuming the interim presidency.
He self swore in. He swore himself in.
Well, self, because you only swear in.
Yeah.
I mean, every president swears personally. He personally sworn in. Yeah. Nobody swore in behalf of him, on his behalf.
Well, a lot of the media doesn't understand that. It's a complicated issue. Venezuela is very complex, and on that issue of him being the interim president of Venezuela is what a lot of these military that deflected or that left the Venezuelan armed forces, they saluted Juan Guaido as the president.
As the president, yes.
And we're waiting for, I think the news is saying 3 generals in Bogota and some more high-ranking officials. We've seen a lot of high-ranking officials also pledging their support to Juan Guaido.
Well, and more than that, because it's not a number, it's a quality thing. Yeah. It's about this particular case of El Pollo Carvajal, because it's not because he was a military. He's on retire now, but he
was 10 years the director of the intelligence agency in Venezuela. Very respected high military official, always loyal to Chavez and loyal to Maduro until just last week.
So everybody could think that anyone could say and deflect, if we want to use that word, but not him. I mean, because he even was captured at Aruba or Curacao, I think, a couple of years ago, because of some implication in drug dealing. So imagine that he was saved. He was also a national thing.
He was detained for 4 days in Aruba because there's a warrant out for his arrest for drug trafficking. And he was brought back after 4 days of intense diplomatic conversations between the Netherlands, which is Aruba is a dependency of, and Venezuela. And he came back a hero for Chavistas.
Yes, I mean the regime has him as a hero. So right now, few hours prior to this humanitarian helping to be received by Venezuelan soil, it was a shock. Yeah. I imagine it wasn't easy for them.
So to resume everything that we've talked about, because Venezuela is a complex country. I mean, we have had a lot, and this is just the news of last week.
Well, last weekend. I mean, we're talking
mostly the weekend.
We were talking only Friday afternoon and Monday and Saturday. So what happened Saturday? Well, like you mentioned it, the humanitarian aid wanted to get into the country. Mostly it was only food and medicines, and some trucks were caught in the middle of some fightings, and they got burned. So the regime says it was set on fire by the own opposition, and the opposition claims that it's the government who does that.
Well, the government was very happy with the results of not being able to get the aid in Venezuela. Regardless if it was burned or not, they were very happy that they blocked that initiative. And just to be clear, we do have a very severe crisis in Venezuela. I mean, the most vulnerable parts of the country, of society, are really suffering. And that vulnerable part of the country, of society, is indigenous people. They're the ones that need the most help.
You're mentioning the indigenous people, and it's important because some of these originary people from Venezuela, they were attacked directly by a group. We're not talking right now in the Colombian border. We're talking about now way south, the Brazil border. So these civilians or military group, they attacked these indigenous people. They wanted to try to get in some medicines into Venezuela. Yeah. And they trapped also a general or a colonel of the National Guard.
Yeah, it's, I've been saying to the media, whenever I give interviews, I say, look, it's impossible that we have a civil war in Venezuela. But more and more, it's becoming more of a possibility. We saw these indigenous groups fighting with bows and arrows against military, trapping some of the generals and colonels, and they were really attacked. They were 3 of them dead. There's 9 that are missing. We don't know if they're alive or not. So there are serious implications to this attack on indigenous people, that they were just trying to get some of the medicine and food inside the country because they need it for their tribes and for their communities. So it's a tricky issue with the Pemones right now.
If for us it's different to continue, what's going on. I'll imagine people that don't live here, don't understand the reality in Venezuela. But I guess we have to put some facts, uncontroversial facts. The fact is there is a crisis. Yeah. Even the regime officials and agents, they admit there's a crisis. Of course, they mention it comes from the blockade made by the U.S. and the imperialism and all that. But there is a blockage. There is a blockage. Political matters to try to stop what's going on in here. But at the same time, people is dying. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we have shortage of electricity. There is no public transportation. There is a lot of problem with any service. I can't think about any service that works right now at all.
And just to make clear, that humanitarian aid that was being brought in on Saturday wasn't enough to solve this crisis. It was not enough to even solve this crisis for a week. And I do believe it was politicized. It was a political tactic to bring that humanitarian aid in and to open those ways so more humanitarian aid could come in and solve the crisis, of course. But in a way, some people say that this humanitarian aid that was coming into the country was like bait for the government, and the government bit the bait. Do you think that?
You could think it was a bait, but we don't need the bait to demonstrate what's going on in here. It's not the first time that the Maduros and previous the Chavez regime, it was considered against human rights. Right now, of course it is getting stronger, the violations, but since 1999 that the government went here, the first thing it did was acting by decree. Violating the due process of legislative law. The due process of law. It doesn't exist in Venezuela at all. But let's move forward, because we began saying that we're going to talk what happened in Lima today.
Yeah, because
the group of Lima in Bogota.
Yeah, moving away from that, I want to know now, what do you think this outcome of the Lima group? They did not decide on whether they would agree or not into a military intervention in Venezuela. In fact, a lot of media is saying that they rejected a military intervention in Venezuela.
I guess, we have to take care of the words, all right? I haven't read any official declaration. Of course, there is a lot of people that claims, okay, we need a military intervention now. We have to be careful with that. Military intervention has to be the last resource. Always they have the resource, all right? Probably the ones that, without saying it, want the military intervention is the same government, to being a victimized, to feel like the victim. But we have to read really carefully what's going on. If we see all the declarations from the United States officials, from Brazil officials, and the member of a group of Lima, we have to read that we have to go another step. Not because it's a test. It's because once you go through the line, there is no way back. Mm. We have to think really about it.
Well, I think the way that they're going forth right now is attacking more the pockets of Maduro's government. So now Pence asked all of the countries in the Lima Group to freeze any PDVSA asset. Now, I don't know if there's a lot of PDVSA assets in Peru or in Chile. I don't think there's any.
No.
And they were threatening countries that support Maduro with sanctions. We saw more sanctions today for 4 governors in Venezuela. 4 pro-Maduro governors received sanctions today. And we'll see if that does anything. And the U.S. also will ask for the UN Security Council to meet again on the case of Venezuela. So what can we expect from that?
Well, those are really challenges for law, for international community. The international community right now is very clear as what's going on here. We saw it from the very first beginning, from the year 2000. It's too bad that 20 years later, the world community sees it. But I guess something has to come. I think there are, yes, real effects of these sanctions, because there are not sanctions directed to the states, to the Venezuela state, but some particular agents. We saw, and we forgot to talk about this guy who was Treasury of the Nation and also worked in the United States, has some member of PDVSA, and see the effect.
Yeah.
He claimed guilty. He played guilty. So all this
Rafael Ramirez.
No, Rafael Ramirez. This Andrade.
Andrade. Yes.
Andrade.
That's a whole nother issue. That's a whole nother program. And
but we'll see. Yes, it comes with real effects, and we hope this international diplomacy get into the what's going on, and I guess we're getting through.
Well, I'm sure we'll get a lot more news this week for our next show. Please join us every Monday.
And if you have any news, and if you have any subject, any matter that you want us to talk about, please write us.
So what do you think we can say for a saying or a proverb in our weekly refrán?
Well, we have this famous one that says, como vaya viniendo, vamos viendo, no?
As we see it, we shall go.
Yes, but we shouldn't act like that. We have to be a little bit more, cautious, and we have to think about where we're going to do different scenarios. And even though, como vaya viniendo, vamos viendo, it's not going to be, it's very strict into that.
Yeah, well, that's very spontaneous. I mean, Venezuelans act spontaneously. So as it comes, we shall see what happens.
That worked for us.
Yeah.
That worked for us, but not for
that works for the show, us, for the show. But yeah, please join us on our different social media that you will see on your screen, and support us on this first English podcast from Venezuela, the only English podcast
directly from
Venezuela about Venezuelan issues. Saludos desde Caracas.
Chao y gracias. Los esperamos.
And until next week.